Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Broadland District Council Planning Committee on Wednesday, the 24th of March, 2021. Thank you to all our officers who enable these virtual planning meetings to progress. Hopefully everything will run smoothly, but please be patient if we should find a few gremlins in the works. We will endeavour to resolve any problems as quickly as possible. Our meeting today will be recorded and the meeting will be live streamed for public viewing on YouTube. The recording of this meeting will also be available on Broadland District Council website. You should be aware any comments made in this meeting will be recorded indefinitely. Please can I ask everyone in attendance to ensure that when your microphones are unmuted, you should try to keep the background noise to a minimum. Background noise can be very distracting from the discussion and information being relayed throughout the meeting. My name is Councillor Sue Lawn, Chairman of the Planning Committee. I will now ask our committee officer to proceed to a roll call for all the other members of our planning committee. At this point, we will also ask members to address agenda item 1 and please advise Officer Matthews if there should be any declarations of interest under procedural rule 8. Thank you, Officer Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. So if members could indicate their presence and any declarations of interest. Councillor Adams.
Yeah, here, and I'm declaring a prejudicial interest in agenda item on the Persimmon application because I've had dealings with Persimmon when on the Helston Parish Council, which has led me to a certain view of Persimmon, and I don't feel I could in all conscience enter this meeting with an open mind. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beadle.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Brennan.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Fisher.
Present and no declarations, thank you.
Councillor Folger.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Harrison.
Present, no declarations. I'm a local councillor for Marsham, so I'll be speaking on that.
Councillor Karimi Guvenlu.
Present. Did have further representation from the Parish Council last night from an email.
Thank you. Councillor Lawn.
Present, and I need to declare non-pecuniary interest in the application for the Royal Norwich Golf Course 2020-1679 in Helston, and on the 7th of April I will be chairperson on the Tree Preservation Order Appeals panel. Therefore I will relinquish the chair of this planning committee for that application and hand over to the Vice Chair Councillor Ward. On completion of the application I will take back the chair of this planning committee for the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Moncur.
Present, no declarations of interest.
Councillor Pratton.
Present. I have to declare a non-pecuniary interest in application 2020-1679, the reserved matters application at the Royal Norwich Golf Club on Drayton High Road, Helston. I am a resident of Helston. However, I am not a member of the Parish Council and I have not attended any meetings held between Broadland District Council officers, Helston Parish Council members and any representatives of the developers. I've discussed the situation with Broadland's officers and it is acceptable to them that I remain on the committee for this application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Ward.
Present, no declarations.
Thank you, Chairman. That completes the attendances and declarations of interest.
Chair, if I may, can I just add to the fact that I think all councillors were sent some lobbying from Mr. Fulcher, so that probably all needs to be declared. I think Councillor Karimi Guvenlu declared it, but I think that was sent to all members, so that probably needs to be an interest that they've all been lobbied.
If I can just advise that I did get the email, but I didn't get it till this morning, so I hadn't actually read it. So I don't have any idea what that communication was in relation to.
We probably just need to do. We probably just need to know which members have read it and which haven't, because otherwise that is in the public sort of domain. So
can we have a show of hands for who received the email and read it?
So that's, can I just take a list? It's Councillor Moncur, Councillor Ward, Councillor Pratton, Councillor Karimi Guvenlu. Is that the lot?
I received it but didn't read it.
Okay.
I just missed it. Well, I started the front and then just left it.
So so there's only 3 members, I understand, who've actually read that communication. That's Councillor Ward, Councillor Pratton and Councillor Karimi Guvenlu. Is that correct? Correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yes, I think that's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that, Officer Matthews. And also present with me today are Officers Helen Mellors, Assistant Director of Planning for Broadland and South Norfolk District Councils, Officer Ben Burgess, Central Area Team Manager for Broadland and South Norfolk, one of our presenting officers today, Officer Matthew Rook, Central Area Team Manager for Broadland and South Norfolk, and our second presenting officer today, Lee Arthurton from Democratic Services, who will be our host for today, and Don Matthews from Democratic Services will take and prepare the minutes of our meeting. Thank you. All members of the committee have received in advance paper copies and agenda, presentation slides and public written submissions for the applications we'll be considering today. At various points throughout the meeting, for example, in relation to questions and comments, I or Vice Chair John Ward will do a roll call in member to member in alphabetical order, requesting the committee's input into various discussions throughout this meeting. They will be held in alphabetical order, requesting the committee members' input. Today, I'm pleased to confirm we will have public speaking for this planning meeting. Only members of the public who are registered to speak in accordance with the Council scheme of public speaking will be able to address the committee. I also need to advise there's no provision for members of the public to circulate documents or photographs at this meeting. The order of our meeting today will be as follows. The Planning Committee will present the key points for the application to the committee for their consideration. This will be followed by questions to the presenting officer from members of the committee in relation to the presentation. Public speakers will then be invited to address the committee. This again will be followed by questions to public speakers from members of the committee. I must emphasise that these questions will only be to clarify something the speaker has said and not for the speaker to put further points across. The order of public speaking is Parish Town Council first, followed by objectors, and finally supporters, i.e. the applicant or the agent. Then it will be council members who are not members of this committee will then be invited to speak for the allocated time of 5 minutes for each speaker. This again will be followed by questions from the members of the committee. The committee will then discuss and determine the application with proposer and seconder for each of the applications we will consider. Members will give their vote to the proposer by roll call, and our committee officers will relay the result of their votes to the meeting. Do we have any questions before we proceed? Okay, thank you. We will now move on to our agenda, and we have already addressed item 1, so we will move to agenda item number 2. Apologies. Officer Matthews, could you please advise?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we've got apologies from Councillor Riley, and Councillor Harrison is his substitute.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will need to take another roll call to confirm the agenda, and that will be on items 3 and 4. We will confirm the agenda of the minutes of the previous meeting, and agenda item number 4, any matters arising therefrom. Thank you, Officer Matthews.
Thank you. So if members could indicate if they're happy with the accuracy of the minutes and let us know if they have any matters arising. Councillor Adams?
Happy with the accuracy of the minutes, no matters arising. Thank you.
Councillor Beadle?
Also happy with the accuracy of the minutes and no matters arising.
Councillor Brennan?
Confirm the minutes, no matters arising.
Councillor Fisher?
Confirm and no matters. Thank you.
Councillor Folger?
Confirm and no matters arising.
Councillor Harrison?
Wasn't there.
Sorry, thank you. Councillor Karimi Goodwin-Liu?
Confirm minutes, no matters arising.
Thank you. Councillor Lorne?
Confirm minutes, no matters arising.
Councillor Moncur?
I wasn't present.
Not present, yeah. Councillor Prutton?
The minutes, no matters arising.
And Councillor
Thank you.
Ward?
Yes, happy with the minutes, no matters arising.
Thank you. That completes that matter, Chairman.
Thank you. And could I just ask Officer Mellors, do you have any matters arising from those minutes, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do have one matters arising. On page 5 of your agenda papers, as part of the minutes at 172 relating to application 2020-1976 at a land adjacent Sunny Acres, Yarmouth Road, Blowfield, You'll note last committee I did raise a matters arising, which was we thought as a result of Highways England comments we would have to refer the application back to committee because they raised new material considerations. We have subsequently had further dialogue with Highways England, who have now sent in their latest response, which is conditional support for that application, which is not raising any new material considerations, which means that that application does not need to be referred back to committee and will now be approved as per the resolution, the original resolution of the committee's decision when that was discussed. So we just need to note that in matters arising, please, Chair.
Thank you. Is that okay, Officer Matthews? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. We will now move on to agenda item number 5, schedule of applications. And we will have our first presentation this morning and Councillor Ward will take the meeting from here. Thank you. If you could please turn my video off, please, Leah, and Councillor Ward, not Councillor Ward, Councillor Adams, please. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Application number 2020-1679, Royal Norwich Golf Club, Drayton High Road, Helston. And I can see we have all our speakers present. The protocol for this section of the meeting is as follows. Our officers will be sharing their screen throughout the presentations. Members will have members have already had this presentation in hard copy. Committee members, please ensure you do not leave your screen at any time during the presentation, public speaking, or discussion of an application. If you should need to leave for any reason, please give the reason to the host in chat, and you'll need to understand that you could then be in a situation where you are unable to vote on the application under discussion at the time of your absence. Please be advised if a member should lose connection for a period of time, the meeting will be adjourned until that member reconnects, and they will be given 5 minutes to reconnect before the meeting will resume. If the member has not reconnected in that timescale, they will not be allowed to vote on the application under consideration. And at the end of the presentation, I will ask for a roll call if necessary, if you have any questions in relation to the presentation. If you subsequently have any further questions, would you please put them in chat? We will now proceed to the presentation. Thank you, Officer Burgess.
Chair, and I'll just share my screen in 1 second. Apologies if you get any background noise, it should be fine, hopefully, but ironically, my neighbours have just started building a house extension and it's very loud. So if it picks it up, apologies, but I put the earphones on, so it should be all right. Right, I'll just share the screen now. If someone could just confirm they've got that. Great, thank you. So, as the chair has said, this is an application at the former Royal Norwich Golf Club on Drayton High Road in Helston. The application is a reserved matters application for appearance, scale, landscaping and layout, and this follows actually the hybrid planning permission 2015-1770, following permission 2017-15-14 for phase 2, comprising 157 dwellings and associated works, including open space, sustainable urban drainage system, landscaping, infrastructure and earthworks. Before I move on to the presentation, I'll just say that this application has been called in to Planning Committee, and that's why we're seeing it today by Councillors Gurney and King. And their reasons are that the application submitted demonstrates an increased number of dwellings than originally stated in the outline planning stage. The application calls for further mature trees to be felled at the expense of increasing dwelling capacity. The applicant, Persimmon, has not, as encouraged to do so, communicated with the parish councillors nor the district councillors to consult for views and assistance. The layout incorporates lagoons, which were not demonstrated on the original plans, and that the new layout and the reduction in green tree structure is contrary to the Helston Neighbourhood Plan and Green Grid expectation. So I'll just talk you through some plans that show us the site location and also some photographs and some elevations. So this gives us an idea of where we are, and the red line shows the whole extent of the scheme that was approved through the hybrid application that I referred to earlier, and that's for up to 1,000 homes on what was the former Royal Norwich Golf Course. To orientate ourselves, this is the Drayton High Road running right through the site, bisecting it right through the middle. This is Helston High School. To the south here is Asda, and then we have Boundary Road, the ring road running along there. This then just gives us an idea about how the scheme is planned to be phased as it moves through its development. And you'll see that what we have here is phase 1, which is well on the way to being completed now. And if you drive along Drayton High Road, you will see that. And then we're on phase 2, which is what we're talking about today. You'll see that it's accessed by this road here, but actually it can be accessed by this road as well, which we'll show on the plans as I work through. And then phase 3 would be the next one. It's going to work numerically going forward. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Of note as well, although not relevant to this scheme, is that there's 2 hectares for a school on this side of the road and 2 hectares of land for recreational open space. And then this gives us the detail of phase 2. You'll see this is the phase 1 area in here that is under construction. Phase 2, you'll see, and I think this will be a key point of the discussions today, does incorporate a number of trees that are proposed to be removed. This is the Helston High School, and then this is phase 3 that will come on next after this phase. And then just to give you that idea of how that layout might look when it progresses, phase 1 all approved and being built, phase 2 as proposed, and then this is the draft phase 3 proposal. Of quite important relevance is there's a large area of land, if you follow the cursor down through this development, this whole area in here, there's no building proposed on that because that's the surface water flow path that's been required to facilitate the sustainable drainage systems on the scheme. And then this is the layout of the scheme. As I said, one access in through here provides a loop, and then it loops around onto phase 1, and you can come out to Drayton High Road here as well. And then the loop, another loop continues this way, ultimately comes through into phase 3, which will go on beyond there. You've got Helston High School, and then properties on Pinewood Close up beyond. And you'll see that it's a traditional style of scheme with a number of residential properties backing onto one another, with gardens backing onto another, and then gardens backing onto the high school, and then some fronting to Drayton High Road, albeit served by a private drive. And again, just to identify this large area of open green space within the site, and just to indicate that there's some surface water drainage lagoons in here, one in here, one in here, and one in this area here. And then this is a plan that I want to show just to give the context of what was approved at the hybrid application stage. So that, when I refer to it as hybrid, that was an outline for the whole scheme and a detailed approval for phase 1. And that was approved at committee some years ago now. What this plan shows is in green, the trees that were agreed to be retained in whole. So there's groups and woodland areas that would be retained. The blue areas show trees that are to be retained in part and some to be removed, obviously, then on the converse. And the red areas are trees that were to be removed as part of this development to facilitate the up to 1,000 homes. And as you'll see, phase 2, which is broadly in this area, incorporates a lot of those trees that were to be removed in whole. And then this is just some extracts from the arboricultural impact assessment and arboricultural method statement document. The most recent revision, there's been 3 or 4 revisions of this during the course of the application, just to give us a clear idea of the amount and location of trees that are to be removed. And I'll talk about the exact amount and detail of that as I get onto the assessment. So these trees along here in the red, these sorts of trees in here, and then the ones that are green are the ones that are, and the blue ones in here are ones that are being retained, and they're primarily oak trees of good quality. And this just talks us through again, that's that large area of green where there will be a significant tree loss. And the reason for that is because of the requirements of the lead local flood authority to not have obstructions in the way to allow the overland flow path through it. And then that just gives us some more detail, closer view of the lagoon in there. Again, just to give an idea of the landscape strategy, these are those oak trees in there that I talked about in here as well. Obviously, a significant number of new trees being planted within the site. This will be determined fully with the lead local flood authority as to what can be planted in here, but there will be some that will be allowed. And then this is useful to see, actually, because this is the drainage lagoon that I talked about previously adjacent to the road here, and it's not dead easy to see, but what hopefully this shows is there's a real significant reprofiling of the land required in this area here to accommodate the drainage requirements of the lead local flood authority. That has resulted in the need for removal of a number of trees, not at the behest of the developer, but at the behest of the lead local flood authority, because it's just a requirement of theirs to make it happen. And then this gives a few next 4 slides give us an example of the types of dwellings that are on it. There's actually a photograph that will come later on from phase 1. This gives an example of the 2-storey dwellings, 2-storey again, but in semi-detached properties. There's one block of 3-storey apartments, and then there's 3 bungalows on the site as well. I'm just going to raise this as well because it's come through within the comments during the application process and has been considered. And I'll just go back to another slide in a second as well. What's been asked is that a pedestrian cycle access is provided right close to the Drayton High Road, coming off this shared pedestrian cycle route into the school grounds. Now, as I said, I'll just very quickly skim back. Sorry, I should have raised this before. The applicants have been willing to and are obliged to provide an access into the school here. There's a couple of visitor parking spaces nearby that as well, and that was agreed through the outline scheme and now has been proposed in detail. So that will be proposed. This area I'm looking at in here has come forward, and I'll skip back to that plan. It's been proposed through by the school and the parish and district councillors as another access they would like to see either or happening. So they'd happy to have both of them or this one. Now, there's been a pushback from officers primarily, along with the Highways Authority, to say that actually we don't consider this to be a great access. Yes, it's closer in terms of the children accessing the school, but our concerns are about the parking of parents dropping off their children here. I accept it's less of a problem with high school children age than it is with primary, but there still will be some drop off in our opinion, which could lead to problems for these people entering and exit their own properties, and the potential for parking down these roads on the side, and also a concern about the safety of the children, as particularly at the end of the day when they're exiting the school, perhaps in groups, and they sort of come to this area here, there's cars in and around it, and it's creating a situation that we as officers don't think is necessary. And then just to show you a few of the photographs, this is the view from Drayton High Road. I'm going to keep using these poplars as a reference, these poplar trees on the boundary with the high school, because they're useful as we go through the scheme. But again, to be clear, these are trees that are proposed to be removed. So the site's within here. And then this is a view looking southeast down Drayton High Road towards the city, towards the boundary junction. This is the fencing with the Drayton High Road from the high school there, their playing fields, and those poplars I talked about before. This is a view from phase 3 to phase 2 across that surface water flow path I talked about, that would be that large area of green space. That's Pinewood Close that I talked about before in the distance that sort of borders onto this scheme. And then that's that northern boundary where we start to see those poplars again with the school site. This is a view from what's being built at the moment, and it's looking south towards the northern boundary. Again, there's those poplars. This is the development that's happening in there at the moment, and phase 3 will be in the distance over there. This is the view from back in phase 3, so way back into the site, looking towards phase 2 with those poplars in the background. And then this is a view through phase 2. You'll see Drayton High Road. We won't see it in the distance, but it's there. That's that northern boundary with the school, and these trees are proposed as a group to be felled. And then just with this one, that's that northern boundary again with those poplars. Drayton High Road's just behind us here, and this is where a lot of phase 2 would be built. And then this is just a photograph of one of the oak trees that is to be retained following discussions and negotiations with Persimmon. And there's 4 of these of good quality that will be retained as part of the scheme. And then, as I said, this just gives you an idea, although it's not come out brilliantly, this photograph, so apologies, of the types of dwellings that we'd be expecting on the scheme. They've settled well into their their surroundings and similarly keen to continue on. So I'll just leave you with that layout plan whilst I talk through the assessment of the scheme in a little more detail. But before I do, I just want to point members to this supplementary schedule on pages 75 to 76 of the agenda. Now, what's been provided there are comments from the Highways Authority and the Contracts Officer. They show that the outstanding issues that they had at the time of the officer writing the report have now been addressed. So therefore, the recommendation on page 51 of the agenda is changed, and I'll refer to that when I come to the recommendation at the end of this presentation, such that it is now asking that the Planning Committee don't need to delegate the application anymore, but can actually approve it today. So moving on to the assessment, the key considerations are detailed on pages 36 to 51 of the agenda. And these are the principle of the development, consideration of the layout, the appearance, scale and landscaping, and then various other matters, including sustainable drainage, ecology and such like. I'm not going to go into detail of all of those right now because they're well set out in the report, but I will pick up a couple of matters. Firstly, I'll point to the principle of the development. Now, as I've stated, this is a reserved matters application for phase 2 of a large site, and it benefits not only from an allocation in the site allocations development plan document, but also from the hybrid planning permission that I talked about before, both of which allow for up to 1,000 homes across the wider former Royal Norwich Golf Course. Now, phase 1 is nearing completion, and it's the developer's intention to move straight on to phase 2, which obviously is important in our housing supply. And they're a national house builder who want to continue on, which is good for the area. The hybrid plan permission didn't specify the number of dwellings which could be delivered in individual phases of the development. So consequently, the number of dwellings proposed for this phase does not breach any principles established at the hybrid stage concerning the quantum of development. And just for members' information, it brings the cumulative total of dwellings on the site to 252. So given this, officers consider the principle of development to be acceptable. So moving away from the principle of development, the only other matters to consider at reserved matter stage are layout, scale, appearance and landscaping, and the extent to which these comply with the hybrid planning permission. Now, a thorough appraisal of these matters are given in the committee report on pages 37 to 49 of the agenda, but I'll pick up a few of the key points now. The design of the properties is a continuation of those on phase 1. These are standard persimmon design, and as can be seen from phase 1, and as I've said already, they've settled well into their surroundings. Taking the amenity next, well, we have to look at future and existing residents, and we consider from an officer perspective, this will be satisfactorily addressed by the way development's been laid out, primarily with back-to-back gardens and appropriate separation distances. I think the key matter to pick up though, given the extent of comments from local residents, district councillors and parish councillors, is that of tree loss. The officer's report and the supporting arboricultural reports, that's the arboricultural implications assessment and the arboricultural method statement, that are submitted by the applicant are candid in their description of 149 trees being removed from the site, with 14 being retained and 235 new trees being planted. But there's no doubt the number of trees to be felled is significant, and it will result in impacts to the landscape and the existing character of the site. However, approved as part of the hybrid application under condition 5 was an arboricultural implications assessment and the preliminary method statement, and this identifies the extent of tree removals which would be necessary to facilitate a development of up to 1,000 dwellings, the plan of which I showed you earlier, and it's also on the agenda on page 55, and that was part of the committee decision to approve the hybrid application when it came before us a number of years ago. Now, this plan shows that the significant majority of trees within phase 2 are coloured red and therefore scheduled for removal. The proposed scheme reflects these approved plans by felling those trees identified for removal, retaining those shown to be retained, and removing in part an area of trees shown for removal in part. So consequently, the extent of tree removals does not exceed that which has already been considered and approved through the hybrid application at committee. It's also worth noting as well that the applicant has been willing to work with officers to amend the scheme to enable the retention of some of the more significant trees within those areas shown for removal, including 2 Category A and 1 Category B oak trees, which have been identified by the Conservation and Tree Officer as being trees of particularly high value, one of which I showed you earlier. So taking this presentation, the officer's report and the supplementary schedule into account, officers considered the scheme to be acceptable and policy compliant, and therefore the committee is asked to agree the amended recommendation and approve this application subject to the conditions on page 51 of the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Officer Burgess. We'll now go to the committee members in alphabetical order to see if you have any questions for Officer Burgess. Councillor Beadle.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Could I ask the officers to recap on the quality of the trees proposed to be removed, please?
Certainly. So what we have submitted is an arboricultural implications assessment and method statement, and within that it goes through all of the trees that are proposed, that have been surveyed within the scheme. Within that, there is no proposed Category A trees to be removed. There are Category B trees and C and Category U trees. There are a number that I can give detail of, but they're lengthy in terms of the number that are to be removed, but there's no Category A trees to be removed, if that's helpful.
Chair, could I also ask then, could you recap on the number of Category B and C, please?
So again, I didn't specifically say how many there were, but if I can just go to the phase 2. So in total, you just need to give me a second, sorry. So if there's, let me get back to this notes, apologies for this, just give me a second. So there are 149 trees being removed from the site, with 14 being retained and 235 new trees being retained. So I haven't got the full breakdown without going through all of the arboricultural implications assessment here, but in effect with there's 149 trees between categories B to U that are being removed from the site.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Ben, for your presentation. Sorry, can I just clarify? I'm trying to jot this down. It follows on from Councillor Beadle's question. Am I correct in hearing that the 149 trees are being taken away, or proposed to be taken away, and the 235 new ones going to be planted?
That's correct, yes.
That is correct. And do we know what type of trees? I mean, are these sustainable? Not something that's going to die back in 50 years or whatever. Are they going to be?
Yeah, so certainly there's a good mix of native species that are being planted within the site. There is as well a requirement to replace trees within 5 years if they've failed as a result of the outline permission, and they have been very carefully considered with our arboricultural and conservation officer. So yes, certainly they are trees that would be looking to be put in for the long term, that will provide structural landscaping, canopy cover, shading, all of those things, and will be of a native species. So yes.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
Councillor Fisher.
John,
do you have any questions?
I've nothing to say at the moment, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Folger, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chairman. The removal of trees has been quoted as being contrary to the health and neighbourhood plan, and clearly we take items very seriously that are included in the neighbourhood plan. Could I ask the officer what weight we should place upon that in coming to our decision?
Certainly, yes. So in the report on pages 41 through to 42, well actually to 43, the officer goes into some detail about the neighbourhood plan, And in principle, let's take the principle first of all. It's very important. The neighbourhood plan forms a key part of the local plan, and as such, weight should be given to it. Interestingly, the officer in the report on page 42, 5.25, states that the Helston neighbourhood plan was adopted in 2017, and this was after the approval of the hybrid application in 2016. Then consequently, principles established by the hybrid application, including the extent of tree removals, predate the ambitions of the neighbourhood plan. And this is actually recognised in the preface of the plan, in which it states, and apologies for reading this out, but I think it's relevant. The plan has been written at a time when Helston is facing major change, primarily in the form of a new housing development at the Royal Norwich Golf Club. The timing of the preparation of this plan means that it's been able to influence the development, but it has served to galvanise interest and brings together residents, businesses and councillors. So whilst it's very relevant, and all neighbourhood plans are very relevant to the decision process, the principle of this scheme and the removal of those trees, as I've shown in the hybrid scheme with that plan that showed all of those removals, was agreed pre the adoption of the neighbourhood plan.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison, do you have any questions? Councillor Harrison, you're muted still.
Okay, sorry.
Any questions?
No.
No, thank you. Councillor Karimi Guvenlu.
Yeah, I've got one question. Was the tree survey done before the detailed design was submitted or after, please?
So the application, when it came in for phase 2, it was submitted as part of the application. So my assumption is that it was done as part of the scheme, and then that informed the way the scheme was laid out. I should say as well, then since the application has been submitted, there has been two revisions to that tree removal plan as well. Well, the arboricultural implication assessment and arboricultural method statement.
Okay. There seems to be some sort of conflict between what you're saying and what the conservation tree officer is saying from the email I got last night. Can you sort of comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that email this morning. My view, my reading of it is that actually the conflict there was with what was submitted with the outline, or with the hybrid approval, as opposed to this detailed approval here. I think she rightly or wrongly, had concerns about what was submitted with the original hybrid scheme, which wasn't the officer at the time. But with this application, I think we need to get back to the principle of it. What was submitted and what was agreed and what was approved at the hybrid stage form the basis of what has been submitted since. And that helped to determine how the layout of the scheme would be. There was always an acceptance with that hybrid scheme that there would be a significant removal of trees. And then what's been submitted since, yes, I think is what the comments are saying, is that the tree officer had concerns about what was submitted with this phase 2, but then it has been amended a couple of times since to make sure that it's a clear picture of those trees that were in place.
Okay, but can you just confirm? I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused when the hybrid application was submitted. Was that 2015 or 2017?
So it was submitted in 2015.
15, so that's 6 years ago.
And it was approved in 2016.
Do you think times have changed a bit since then with the idea of removing trees? With the climate emergency that we're in now, we should be retaining more trees rather than cutting them down. Do you not think that's some consideration?
I certainly think it's a consideration, and I think from what we've done from an office perspective, we've tried to balance things up as we always do. The balance here is actually there's a scheme that's approved and allocated for up to 1,000 homes with a developer who wants to build houses, who owns the site, and they're progressing on and they build a number of houses in our area, and we have a housing supply to meet. We also have to balance that up with the climate challenges that we are facing at the moment. And whilst we don't want to see too many trees being removed, of course we don't, there is work from the applicants that they've done to try to retain some of the best quality trees within this site, which they didn't initially when the application came in, but have worked with us to do so. I think it can't be perhaps underemphasised the amount of new tree planting that is going in. So I won't go through every group because that wouldn't be relevant. But if we think about the poplar trees on the boundary with the high school, I throw it out there. I love a poplar tree, but they don't have a great lifespan. They aren't great next to residential properties. And actually what's being proposed through this is we plant a new, more native hedge with tree planting interspersed on that hedgerow on the boundary. So whilst we're losing older mature trees, we're getting in effect what will be a better solution for those residents moving forward over the next 30, 40, 50 plus years.
I was going to say, yeah, for a new tree being planted, the benefits from that is not going to be seen from 50 to 100 years time. So those residents will have no benefit from them.
Well then, yeah, and again, I won't get into an argument about this, but it's interesting, isn't it? The disbenefit is if we were to retain all of the existing trees on the site, regardless in some ways of their quality or their form or their life expectancy, then that benefit of them may be lost within 10, 20, 30, 40 years, but then it will be felt in 10, 20, 30, 40 years by the residents in the future if we plant more trees now. So look, it's a tricky balance. I'm just here as the officer in the middle trying to propose what's been put forward. And we do, I think the key thing I'd put is I know I've already said it, but we do have that balance to make as the officers who are trying to balance out those matters of climate change, of trees, but then also a whole other number of matters such as the sustainable drainage requirements, the number of houses that we can get onto a site that is allocated, and the 5-year supply we have of housing. And if we can't deliver on allocated sites, then that will leave us in some difficulties.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moncur.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor
Thank
Ward.
you. Councillor Prutton.
Yes, I would just like to ask, in respect of the 235 new trees, we've been assured that they're covered, their life is covered there for the initial 5 years. Does this mean that the developers have proposed an acceptable sort of commitment to a comprehensive care plan for the first 5 years of their lives? Is this built into any agreement?
Certainly. So there's a landscape management and maintenance plan, that comes with the application, and we would be approving that as part of this scheme. So it would be one of the approved plans, and the details of how they would be managed and maintained are within that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. There were no subsequent questions, I don't think. No. Thank you. We'll move on now to public speaking. And our first public speaker is from Helston Parish Council, Mr. Fulcher. So Leah, if you could please unmute Mr. Fulcher. And Mr. Fulcher, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. You'll be reminded when there is 1 minute remaining. So please introduce yourself, and you have 5 minutes from now.
Thank you, councillors. Apologies, but I need to be brief and fast as I only have 5 minutes, but there's plenty of information to prove the following points further. Some of this information was shared with all councillors yesterday and can be produced along this speech upon request. The Parish Council objects to this application on the grounds that the decision of outlying or hybrid planning permission 2015-1770 was based under false information presented to the planning committee at the time. When the information is proven to be false, then decisions upon them must be reviewed. This is a general understanding of all good governance. The tree reports, all 4 of them, have consistently undervalued the tree stock on this site, and an accurate and a detailed report could well have led to a different outcome, if only in terms of a lower total number of houses needed to preserve a larger number of higher quality trees. I will try and explain how multiple tree surveys have been deeply flawed, both in methodology and in substance. Methodology first. The planning officer in his report, paragraph 5.15, admits errors in the tree survey and tries to pin these on an accepted part of the process by saying, I do not consider the methodology of the previously submitted arboricultural information which was supported the hybrid application is fundamentally flawed, as it was proportionate to the scale of the work necessary to support an application of the scale proposed. In other words, not all trees should be surveyed, would be surveyed, and mistakes may be made. Now, the British Standard Trees document, BS 5837, British Standards for Trees in Relation to Construction 2012, which governs these surveys, says that an accurate measured topographical survey should be taken showing all relevant features. When measuring woodlands or substantive tree groups, individual trees with stem diameters greater than 150 millimeters or 6 inches need to be plotted. Not only did this not happen in outline planning application in 2015, this level of detail in the tree report didn't turn up until 19th of January 2021, as per the Broadland planning documents. The tree survey for phase 2 submitted in September originally needed to be amended, as it took local residents to point out that the tree surveyor hadn't done the job properly and had found errors in their report. This is an example of failure of methodology. This full level of detail should have been given to the committee every step of the way, including outline planning permission. Now, the planning officer might try and tell you, which he implies in his report, that it's the committee's responsibility to raise any concerns about the methodology at the time. But the committee are not the specialist experts and defer to the wisdom of those professionals who are paid to advise. And it's here when any responsibility for misinformation lies. Thus, you can argue that the committee was misled. Another point on methodology, paragraph 4.5.5 of the British Standard Trees document sets out the precautionary principle, categorising trees as high value when they cannot be seen or accessed. The Tree and Conservation Officer doesn't believe this has been followed, as can be seen in her email recently shared. In addition, she queries the lack of Category A trees and the assumptions made in categorisation and comments. These two examples have pointed out a failure of methodology in relation to the outline planning permission, but let's look at the methodology in the detailed planning permission for phase 2. The British Standard Trees document says the tree survey should be independent and made available to designers prior to and independently of any specific proposals to the development. And the detailed tree report didn't arrive until 19th of January 2021, as per the Broadland planning documents, long after Persimmon submitted their first plans for phase 2 in September. Going further, the most recent update to the tree survey, 22nd of February, happened after Persimmon submitted their most recent plans and after the consultation period had ended. So the plans were not available to the designer and the consultees before the plans were created. Failure of due process, you could argue. Let's look at substance now. The Parish Council provided the planners a side-by-side analysis of the tree report in 2015 and the detailed third tree report from 2021. The comparison shows one group of trees to be wholly inaccurate, as in not a single tree correctly identified, and another group to be wrong for over 85% of trees. And there are many more examples of this. And the final email from the Conservation Tree Officer I've shared, to quote, the information in the reports was inadequate and lacking in detail, meaning the trees have not been properly considered. The plans show few attempts to integrate existing trees into the design. I ask for all phases that an accurate assessment of trees is carried out and adequate access to the trees is arranged prior to the surveys. We need this to see how the proposed removals diminish local biodiversity and habitat connectivity can be mitigated. At present, we are unable to do this. Nonetheless, the planners have misquoted her by saying in their paragraph 5.54 that the Conservation and Tree Officer supports the proposed landscape strategy as amended. But if you read her comments in her final paragraph 4.1, she only supports the proposed landscape strategy in terms of the areas of grass around the retained oaks.
Thank you, Mr. Fulcher. Thank you. Right, members, do you have any questions for the speaker? And I must remind you that questions are to clarify something the speaker has said, and not to ask the speaker to put further points across. So do any members have a question, please? You could raise your hand if you do. Yes, Councillor Beadle.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, there's a tree issue here. Could I ask the speaker, have they actually done any categorisation of trees, or know of anybody else who's done categorisation of these trees?
No, not as far as I'm aware. It's just that all the trees have been done by the same tree surveyor, and we provided the tree survey to the local tree ward network coordinator.
Okay, right, thank you very much. Any further questions for the speaker, please? No, thank you. So we move on to our next speaker, Ms. Alison Cornish. Lee, if you could unmute Mrs. Cornish, please. Ms. Cornish, thank you for attending our meeting. You'll have 5 minutes to address the committee and will be reminded when you have 1 minute left. Please introduce yourself and your time starts now.
Thank you. My name is Alison Cornish and I'm one of the senior planners at Persimmon Homes. Also attending is Stephen Milligan from Oakfield Arboricultural Services, who is the project arboriculturalist for Persimmon, who is available to answer any questions members may have. We welcome the officer's recommendation for approval subject to conditions, so I only want to say a few words in support of this scheme. The development of the site would see the delivery of 157 much needed homes, of which 33% would be affordable. The delivery of 33% affordable housing is unusual, as most of the current schemes within the Norwich area are currently only delivering 28% of their dwellings as affordable. However, we fully appreciate that the overriding concern from residents and the parish council alike is the loss of trees that will occur as a result of the proposed development. We totally understand this concern and are not undertaking the felling of these trees lightly. However, the site is allocated for residential development, excuse me, of up to 1,000 houses. The Outline Planning Commission has been granted for the construction of up to 1,000 houses in accordance with the local plan allocation. In order to get anywhere near 1,000 houses on this site with all the associated infrastructure and community benefits, it was recognised and accepted by Broadland District Council at the Outline Planning Commission stage that it would be necessary for a number of trees to be felled on this land. However, we have worked closely with Broadland District Council during the processing of this application and have managed to refine the proposed layout to ensure the retention of the most significant oak trees within this phase, resulting in the felling of fewer trees than permitted by the Outline Planning Commission. Added to which, this application is supported by a comprehensive landscaping scheme which would see 235 new trees planted on the site, together with the creation of a wildlife corridor along the northern boundary of the site adjacent to the school. In trying to accommodate the retention of the maximum number of trees and address the various other constraints that exist on this site, we are currently looking at only being able to accommodate approximately 390 houses on the eastern side of Drayton High Road, whereas the Outline Planning Commission was predicated on 500 dwellings being accommodated on this side of the road. We acknowledge that Helston Parish Council have a number of concerns regarding the development proposed, and we met with representatives from the Parish Council on the 12th of January this year to discuss these concerns. As a result of this meeting, we made a number of changes to the details of the scheme to address the concerns raised. Finally, we understand that the creation of a pedestrian link from the site into Helston High School is a priority for this scheme. As such, a link has been included in the layout in accordance with the master plan approved as part of the Outline Planning Commission. However, I understand that there has been extensive discussion on the correct location for this footpath link, with some support for the creation of the footpath closer to Drayton High Road. I would just like to confirm that Persimmon are content for this link to the school to be created in the location preferred by members, either in the position currently shown on the layout, position preferred by the Parish Council at the front of the site, as shown on the alternative plan provided to the case officer, or indeed in both locations. We respectfully request that members support the officer's recommendation to approve this application subject to conditions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Do any members have questions for the speaker, please? Yes, Councillor Prutton and then Councillor Creamy, Lou.
Ms. Cornish, you said two words in your presentation just then, which I picked up on: community benefits. Could you tell us what they are, please?
They are going to be delivered mainly on the western side of the development, but basically it's going to be 2 hectares of sports pitches, which will be transferred to Helston Parish Council, together with a community building for changing rooms, etc. We are gifting some of the site to the Education Authority, a new primary school, and obviously there's the 33% affordable housing. And then there'll be various, obviously, play areas for children of the development, and also the woodland areas, which obviously were privately owned previously by the Royal Norwich Golf Club, will be, I understand from discussions with Ben, Broadland District Council, that we will need to set up a management company to manage those, and they will be made available for public access. So there'll be a recreational value as well on an informal basis across the site.
But nothing specific on phase 2.
Not at the moment. We'll be delivering a LEAP, a local equipped area of play, within the phase 3 development, which will be to serve all 3 phases on this side. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ms Cornish.
Councillor Karimi Govinlu, please.
Hi, Ms Cornish. Could you elaborate on you mentioned a green barrier north of the school. Could you elaborate on that, please?
The wildlife corridor.
Yeah.
That's where the poplar trees are currently situated, which we have obviously taken advice from our arboriculturist and had lengthy discussions on site with Broadland District Council's tree officer concerning the longevity of these poplar trees, their future maintenance and management. And there are concerns, obviously, that those poplar trees are reaching the end of their sort of natural life. They're not a suitable tree to have in that location close to either residential properties or indeed the school playing fields. As some of you may be aware, a lot of the bits of the trees actually fell down onto the playing fields during the strong winds we had recently. So what we're proposing is to take all those poplar trees out and to plant a number of native species which are better suited to that location, and also to plant a native mixed hedgerow along there, which will have a depth of about 1.5 metres. So that will create the wildlife value that is needed along that boundary, but will also provide a green screen and the soft edge to the school.
So will that be between the fence for the school and the back gardens of the houses along there?
Yes, so it'll be managed by the management
It's only 1.5 metres. It's not very wide, is it?
We've been advised by the tree officer for the council that she'd be happy with that, and that's what our landscape consultants have advised as well.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any other members wish to ask a question of the speaker?
Councillor Fisher.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, can I just ask, effectively, for the look of it, what we've got here is that the original plans for 1,000 houses was determined before any real detailed positioning was put in place, and so in order to make the 1,000 house designation practical and realistic and producible, what we're now really saying is that we've got to change the layout of the trees. Can you confirm that?
Yes, I mean, obviously, when the site was allocated for the housing initially, there was some acknowledgement and acceptance that in order to get up to 1,000 houses on the site, that a number of the trees would have to come down. It's not physically possible to build 1,000 houses with all the infrastructure on that site without some of the trees having to go. So the principle was established at that stage, before even the outline planning permission was granted, at allocation stage, that there would be some tree loss on this site. And we are having to obviously try and fit in around the trees as much as possible, but that number of houses will dictate a significant change to the landscape. And as a result, we cannot keep a lot of mature trees because they are in the wrong place. So we're proposing to replace them with newly planted trees, which will give to the tree cover on this site. Because the other issue, which I think we need to touch on, is it's not just the constraint of the trees on this site that we're having to deal with, it's also the topography of the site and also the drainage requirements that we are having to accommodate within the site. So as Ben has alluded to, we have to balance up all the constraints and the need to get a certain number of houses on the site in determining the layouts that we come up with.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Are there any further members' questions for this speaker, please?
Yes, please, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Beadle.
Coming back to these poplars along this school boundary, like poplars are, can I say, when they go down in the wind, they really do go down, and the big trees. So I understand the need for replacing them, but 1.5 metres for planting of any replacement, and it's going to be maintained by the management company. Could I ask how access is going to be gained to this area? If it's only 1.5 metres wide and you've got a tree in the way, how are you going to get past it? So could I ask how the management is going to be undertaken?
Yeah, the lands, just to go back a step, the landscape architects were obviously given the brief to pick tree species and plant species that would be suitable for that location in terms of the way they grow and the form of the tree. So those have been carefully chosen. And there will be at the within some more public areas where the car parking things are, there will be access points along that strip for maintenance by maintenance contractors. So they will get access from the sort of parking areas at either end of that strip.
So, sorry, Chair. I'm obviously not making myself plain. Where the new planting is behind the residences, and is sandwiched between the rear gardens and the playing field, 1.5 meters, including planting of various species. I'm just wondering how staff are going to get down there to do any maintenance, let alone the overhang which they're going to have onto the school or onto the private gardens. How is that going to be done, please?
Well, obviously there will be sufficient width within that corridor for people to get down to do the pruning of the hedge or the trimming of the trees, whatever's needed. But also from the school side, if the school needs to do any maintenance from their side, we can either get access through the school with their permission to do the maintenance from their side, or the school would be able to maintain from their side as well, because it will be right up to their chain link fence.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from any other members? No, thank you. Then we move on to our next speaker, Mr. Milligan. Mr. Milligan, if Leah could unmute Mr. Milligan. Mr. Milligan, you have 5 minutes to speak and you'll be reminded 1 minute before the end. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, and your time starts now, please.
Hi there. Yep, my name is Mr. Stephen Milligan. I'm the arboriculturist. I was actually unaware that I was due to speak in such a manner, in all honesty. So I will just cut it there, if you don't mind.
Okay, so are there any questions for Mr. Milligan, please, who is an arboriculturalist? So this is the expert on the trees, if you wanted to ask him a question. Councillor Beadle.
Yes, Chair. Could I ask the same question of Mr. Milligan? This 1.5 metre strip for the replacement planting, how is it going to be maintained in practice? Because 1.5 metres is not very wide.
Well, yes, I think 1.5 metres is satisfactory. To be fair, you could have a 1 metre width hedge, which is more than adequate. Tree stems are going to, a metre wide tree, if you like, it is a mature, what you could picture as a mature veteran oak, is obviously going to take hundreds of years to get to that sort of size. So trees are unlikely to get in the way. I would deem that there'd be sufficient room for somebody with a hedge trimmer to get down the side, trim the hedges and rake out the risings.
Thank you. Any other questions from any members? Councillor Karimi Guvenlu.
Hi, Mr. Milligan. Could you let me know how many trees are in category A? And let me just read this. And how many trees that had a slight defect that were not put in category A?
Overall, there were 2 category A oaks.
Okay. And how many trees which are generally of high quality, which might have a defect, but would not reduce their retention span below the 40-year threshold, were not put in category A?
I couldn't give you exact numbers on that, but from recollection, within the trees surveyed on phase 2, there were approximately 70 category B trees, I believe.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other members wish to ask a question? No, thank you. Then we'll move on to Councillor David Britcher, and Leah, if you could unmute Councillor Pritchard, please. And Councillor Pritchard, you have 5 minutes and you will be reminded 1 minute before the end. If you'd like to start now, thank you.
David Britcher, the Councillor for Helston South East. You will have heard from others today the technical reasons why this planning application should be refused or at least amended. Tree survey reports and etc. in doubt whether there's possible maintenance issues for actually the proposals. I'm going to give you thoughts on why this planning application should be refused or at least amended, having lived in Helston for the majority of my life with my family. I have sadly have to watch the green open space and very mature trees being lost to housing all over Helston. We are very short in supply of trees in Helston. Yeah, I have played on the golf course as a youngster in the sledging in the winter and also as a golfer in later life. The green open space and the trees are a landmark in the local area. The bomb crater is a constant reminder that even a world war could not destroy the trees and the green space for decades that have grown there for decades. Housing is necessary for people to thrive and live a wonderful life. However, homes can and should be built around the present natural area in harmony with what nature has so generously provided. There are only excuses for cutting down trees and changing the habitat from the current way it is as present in this valuable green space in Helston. Even now, after several years, I cannot believe how the district councillors before me allowed and supported the golf course development to ever be started in the first place. Helston does not have enough open green space, and I asked this planning committee to do all it can in its powers to prevent as much loss of the natural scene and the habitat of animals and creatures of this green space in Helston. The mature trees are there for a reason. As I said before, they survived a world war. Planning law may say otherwise, that this application is worthy of approval. However, we are all here today know that green space and the mental effect it has upon us all would dictate that no open space of this significance to Helston is worth losing for the sake of bricks and mortar. Helston deserves this green space saved. Last comment is, not sure how lagoons are safe for children.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pritchard. And do any members have a question for Councillor Pritchard, please? No, okay, thank you. So we'll move on to our final speaker, which is Councillor Sheila Gurney. Leo, if you could unmute Councillor Gurney, please. And you have 5 minutes, Councillor Gurney, and we'll be reminded 1 minute before the end. So please introduce yourself and start now.
Hello, I'm Sheila Gurney, Councillor for Helston North West. 5 minutes of local member speaking does not afford realistically me sufficient time to express how disappointed and concerned I am about the recommendations in this report. The unwillingness of Persimmon until the 11th hour this year to actually come and talk to the parish council after a period of nearly 3 years is absolutely concerning and appalling. 2 years of a working group's time to prepare a neighbourhood plan with all concerns of our community over housing growth, developments and associated infrastructure requirements is in general discussed and dismissed in the officer's report. The green grid pales into significance because the neighbourhood plan came after this report was, this application was approved. So does this mean now every time another phase comes forward, the green grid pales into insignificance because of its timing? I think it's about time somebody took notice of our green grid plan and had a look at it. The replacement of the poplar trees with a green hedge as a green corridor, to me, is an absolute joke. The tree report that was from 2015 is demonstrated to be flawed and inaccurate, and the felling of so many trees on this site is abysmal. I would like to point out something that hasn't come out in this is Persimmon's desire to build even more houses, in that last year Helston Parish Council was approached about grabbing back the allocation of 2 hectares of land to try and share it with the school. so that 2 additional hectares of land given to the parish council was to become available for even more houses. So I'm not very happy with the way things have gone on at all, and neither are my residents. And that is why you have seen so many comments from residents about this application. Now, turning to the one thing I really want to fight for this morning, and this is this gate near Drayton High Road. It is smoke and mirrors to say that cars will pull up and they will drop off. This can be maintained by double yellow lines and flashings and having a no dropping off zone. The school desperately want this access near the Drayton High Road. They say that the one further into the development is too deep and too far away, and the children won't walk down to it. This access Persimmon have willingly agreed to put in, but our officers at Broadland have a different view. Now, with the greatest respect, I live in Helston, I talk to the school, and I have first class knowledge on what the school want and what the school require. This entrance near the corner of Drayton High Road will take the children off the pavement, off the dangerous pavement there, which will also be eventually lined out as a cycle path. So the best we can do to keep our children safe in Helston is to put in this gate. If it doesn't work for some reason, it can be closed, but I would like to see it put in, and I would like to see it trialled for at least a year to see how it works and if there is any adverse traffic congestion. So I'm asking, pleading with councillors this morning, as I have been told to do by officers who have advised me that if I want this gate put in, I will have to plead with the planning committee. Well, I'm pleading with you. Please put this gate in for us. Leave the other one there as well. Let's try it. Let's see what happens and let's review it. And also, I'd just like to say, I am concerned, as David Britcher is, about the lagoons, particularly next door to a children's play area. This is just absolutely ridiculous. And at the meeting we did eventually get with Persimmon, they did agree to put some fencing around it. I don't know whether it's going to be enough to keep a child away from a lagoon. The heavy rain we've had in Helston over the last few months has demonstrated some pretty instances of flash flooding and a lot of waterfall. But please, councillors, look at the trees. The reports originally are flawed. This decision that planning hybrid application is based upon a flawed tree report. And now the truth has come to light about the trees, and we need to revise it and we need to look at it again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gurney. Does anybody have a question for the speaker, please? No, thank you. Right, we now have an open discussion in relation to the application in front of us. I'll come to the councillors alphabetically in turn on this, and after discussion, the committee will determine the application. If necessary, during the discussion, officers Mellors and Burgess will be able to respond to your questions. So if you wish to make any comments, I will go around, starting with Councillor Beadle, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. The community facilities on the other phases, the other side, the Drayton High Road, will they be conditioned as a condition on this site, or are they separate?
Answer that, Chair. As part of the hybrid approval, there's a section 106 agreement that runs with the application, and those obligations, those provisions have been provided and agreed through that. So yes, they will happen. They're not specifically tied to this phase, but they're tied to the development as a whole.
Okay. Also, if we're getting into the discussion on this application, I am quite concerned that there are a lot of trees going here. 70 category B trees approximately has been said by the agriculturalist. I'm also concerned that 1.5 meters for a tree or a replanting along the boundary between the rear gardens and the school playing field, it's not very much. It's 4'6", something like that. I can reach wider than that. And when you get a row of vegetation down there, whether they're trees or whether they're sort of hedging material, I just don't think it's be a replacement for what this is. I do note what the officers just said about the community facilities, and I think that's good, including the land if it's commuted to presumably the parish council. And I'm also pleased about the 33% affordable accommodation as well. So there is a lot of pluses for this development, but there's a lot of minuses as well, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, one for Ben and one for Helen, please. I'll start with Ben. It shouldn't take very long. The proposal to have an additional entrance to the school near to Drayton High Road, and the suggestion that yellow lines go in. Surely yellow lines are down to highways. Would that be correct?
Certainly.
Certainly.
Sorry, I can't hear you, Ben. Sorry.
Sorry, yes, certainly.
Right.
Highways, yeah.
So have highways raised any objection to actually having, like I'm struggling to find it, any objection to actually having the entrance put in that position?
So it's not in the report. We've only had verbal confirmation that they could see some potential highways issues. I'll be very clear. This is mostly coming, as Councillor Gurney has said, from us as officers. We do have concerns about it. So whilst I've perhaps just to be clear, haven't necessarily suggested that Councillor Gurney plead with the committee today. I think it is a matter for the committee to consider, because there's a willing developer who's happy to put it in, but there are concerns from officers about it.
So if yellow lines were put in, would that alleviate some of the concerns of the officers?
Look, again, I'm only speaking from personal experience here, but when I drop the children off at school, when I walk the children to school, yellow lines mean nothing to a lot of parents. Yep. And I've been, and again, just anecdotally, when it starts raining a little bit, then there's even more cars at the school for all those parents who were dropping the kids off before. There is a difference, and I will always try to be balanced, because that's what the planning officer should do. There is a difference, certainly, from primary schools to high schools. There is less dropping off. There's no doubt about that. I think there's a real benefit in offering at least one other entrance into the school through the development in the one further into it. But as I said, I think that's a matter for the committee to consider.
Sure. Can I just another rider to that? What about school keep clear zigzags? Is that again down to highways?
Yeah. Again, it would be.
So that is somewhat easier to enforce, isn't it? Not if that was put in. But I suspect from my limited knowledge that it'd be unlikely to have that as close to a main arterial route as this is proposed to be.
Yeah, again, look, I'm not
trying to put you on the spot, Ben.
No, well, that's what I'm here for. I think I think there is a good. I can't argue with the sense of having another access into the school site. As many accesses as possible make a lot of sense. I just have concerns, as does the officer and as highways verbally, at least, that it could lead to some issues. That's my own. I just don't want to create something in the future that we look back on and are concerned about.
May I make a suggestion additional to that, if I may, Chair?
Yes.
I think, clearly, officers have given a position, and I think, we would always, as a point of principle, accept 2 accesses to the school to serve the school, especially when they're pedestrian and cycle accesses. I mean, something for members to consider may be that actually, if from a highway safety point of view, notwithstanding the officer's concerns about the potential conflict of how that is used so close to the junction, if the highway authority was not raising a highway safety issue, then obviously that may be something for you to take into your consideration, and we could directly ask that comment of them, because it sounds like from Ben that we haven't actually got that from them. But if they're not raising an objection to those 2 points of access, then that may be something for you to consider in addition to the officer's concerns they've outlined.
So could I ask you, Helen, as a committee, could we put a provision on that the access is provided, but it's moved further towards the east, so it comes further away from the...
Well, there is already a proposal for an access further down that entrance way through. So that would be, there's already one further down within the housing scheme, a link through there. What the proposal is and the benefits of having it closer to the top is that you will get more people potentially using it than walking down into the new housing, if you like, estate and then having to go across. It's actually taking that desire line from a higher point, of which we do have a bit of concern. And it could be that members resolve to agree the 2 access points subject to the views of the Highway Authority, because I think that is obviously key to making sure that is acceptable in safety terms, notwithstanding, as I said, the concerns that we've raised about the practicalities of that. But I think it would give you a bit more assurance that the Highway Authority does not think that will cause an issue.
Thank you, Helen. And if I can just quickly, sorry to take up so much time, just come back to what would have been my original question for Helen. Is there any reason in planning protocol why we have to, if you like, override this current local plan that Helston have? I can't see them.
Yeah, as Ben has already outlined, the planning permission was granted, the outline planning permission, which is a significant material consideration, it always is, because that's setting the scene and what you're proposing to move forward on this site, but also it came through as an allocation. So the allocation was also acknowledging to some degree, because of the scale of development proposed for its allocation, and that's a council's decision, that there would be some tree loss on the site. The fact that you've then got a neighbourhood plan coming after that, then clearly the outline permission has that hierarchy of that significant weight you have to give. Material consideration is the neighbourhood plan, and I think because of the neighbourhood plan, and we always welcome those, we always take those into consideration, is that we have been pushing back with Persimmon to retain as many trees as possible because of that neighbourhood plan. You can't actually say no trees shall be lost because of that outline planning permission, but certainly the benefits of having that neighbourhood plan gives us additional weight to say, look, subsequent to this, there is now that policy that needs to be taken into account, but ultimately for us to make the decision, we have to give more weight to the outline planning permission.
Okay, thank you, Helen.
Okay, Councillor Fisher.
Nothing to add, actually. That last comment from Helen was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Folger.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, my main concern is what I consider to be the excess removal of trees on this situation, and bearing in mind the timescale of the neighbourhood plan, etc. Nevertheless, it is an important document, and clearly the volume of trees to be removed, I think, is contrary to what is contained in the neighbourhood plan, and I have serious concerns on this particular point.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison.
Sorry, Chair, could I just make a comment?
Yes, please.
Okay. Apologies for jumping in. Apologies, Councillor Harrison. It's a response to Councillor Folger there, but I think it's also a more general response as well to a number of things that have been raised, but I think it's the right point to bring it up now. We've touched upon earlier about some of the community benefits that are coming as part of this scheme, one of which is the affordable housing, one of which is the school, the playing pitches. What we have also here is a site that has lots of level changes. It's obviously got a number of trees, and there's a lots of constraints within the sites, but also lots of opportunities. What's been proposed at the moment, and I'm not saying it's a rarity, but it's a real positive, is we've got a policy compliant scheme in terms of affordable housing. We've got a scheme that has then provided the playing picture, providing the school all in line with the policy. But actually, if we have a concern about the number of trees that are being lost, which of course we do, well, if we were to retain a significant number of the trees, there would, by the knock-on effect, be the ability to provide less houses on the site. If there's less houses that are able to be provided across the whole site, then that might call into question, from a developer's perspective, the viability of the scheme. And if the viability of the scheme is to change, well, they might look to try to renegotiate some of those benefits that are coming, and we've all seen before schemes that have a low affordable housing percentage. So I'm just giving the balance, I suppose, that we as officers of why we've come to this position at the moment. I just thought it was relevant to pick up at that point with Councillor Folger had said.
because the actual scheme is policy compliant as far as affordable housing is concerned. Is that not true?
That's correct, but also that is your key material consideration is your allocation and what you have already made a decision on. And that's where you have to give that significant weight to those previous decisions that have been made and within the allocation of the site, which was acknowledging loss of trees on this site to deliver the much needed housing we need moving forward. So it has always been a carefully balanced decision. But I would urge you very much not to give significant weight to the neighbourhood plan, which was made after your council's decision on that outline planning permission. You need to really carefully look at that.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
No, I think it's all been said. Councillor Brennan and Beadle asked my questions for me, so that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Karimi Guvanlu.
Right. Yeah, this is a very complicated situation. I do understand that we need affordable housing, but presumably Persimmons knew the restraints on this site when they purchased it. And I just wonder if 1,000 houses on that site is a realistic expectation, considering the amount of trees that are going to be lost, the flooding in the area. I'm particularly concerned about the inaccuracies of the arboriculturist report. I don't think that is 100%. And also the lagoon near the play area. Now, I know Fitzsimmons said they're going to put a fence around it, but we know what kids were like. Kids will be kids, they'll climb over a fence. And I'm very concerned with the safety for children there. The gate access to the school, I do agree we do need a gate access there. I think it should be trialled for a year. I'm sure we can put some sort of markings down to say no parking. The other access is quite far into the site, as you said. So I don't know how much that will be used. I'm really very much in two minds about this. Yeah, that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moncur.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Officers, do we need to get anything in the recommendation about the gate at the top, or is that covered off?
I think if members specifically want that included, then I would suggest you say that subject to highway safety being acceptable. So yes, we could include that as in there will be two accesses indicatively shown subject to agreement of the Highway Authority, if that is what members want to do.
Do we want to have a vote on that or see what people say on that, or is that if everyone's happy to go forward, but that's going to be in there?
Well, shall we just take a show of hands on putting this other gate in, please? All those in favour of putting the gate in, please show. Right, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, I've got two screens, so it's hard to count them up. And
you have a majority there of members who want that included. So
there is
yes.
a majority,
yes.
Yes.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Do we want some wording on that then?
Yeah.
Would you like me to summarise that for you? So I think what you're saying,
Yes,
obviously
please.
you haven't gone to your substantive vote yet, but if
No.
If you are going along with the officer recommendation, then it's been proposed by Ian Moncur and agreed by the rest of the committee that you would want an additional recommendation, which is to have two pedestrian accesses indicatively so subject to the agreement of the Highway Authority.
Yep.
So can I just say, Councillor Moncur, are you proposing that we accept officer's recommendation?
Yes, I am.
With the gate
with
in,
that,
yes?
with that proviso of the gate.
I'll be happy to second that. Right, we just carry on.
When we get to that point.
Yeah, Councillor Pratton.
I wish to associate myself with what Caroline Karimi Guvanlu said. I could mirror her comments precisely. Thank you.
Right, now, does anybody else wish to speak before we go to the vote? Councillor Beadle.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a difficult one. That's why it's before the committee, I presume. As I mentioned earlier, this 1.5 metre green belt between the rear of the gardens and the high school. Is it possible, Chair, to ask Alison Cornish if this could be practically widened, say to 2.5 metres, which would allow a little bit more space without actually having an undue impact on the development?
No, sorry, we can't do that. We've got the application as it is in front of us, and it's already been proposed and seconded that we accept. Anybody else wish to speak before we go? Yes. Did you want to say something else, Councillor Bean?
Yeah, yes, Chair. We've got a proposer and seconder to the application. I'd like to propose amendment that this belt of planting between the rear gardens and the high school be increased to 2.5 metres.
I'll just ask Officer Mellors whether that, I don't think that's appropriate, is it? How can we do that?
If members want a condition, I mean, you can obviously agreeing a permission can be subject to conditions. We've obviously outlined a number of conditions to you as well. If that is a condition of your approval, that is something you can technically consider. I think as an officer, we would need to make sure that's technically viable to do without impacting on the overall layout, because it actually may not be achievable within the proposed layout without accommodating the houses as proposed. So that's not quite as straightforward. Ben may be able to comment on that further, but there's something we could technically explore.
If I could do, that would be helpful. And I think what I'll do, if that's okay, Chair, I'll just share my screen for that part of it.
Yes,
I think
okay.
it's just useful in this instance, I think. He says now not being able to find where it is. It's a pain, isn't it? Right. Here we go. So this is the area that we've been talking about in here, this sort of tree belt along there, and it continues along there with the access as said, that's the, it says in there, and with the access to get into it both there and over here. I think the thing to consider, and as Helen's pointed to already, is if we were to amend that, then that would have knock-on effects of the scheme. One of the knock-on effects could be we reduce the size of the gardens, but the other knock-on effect, which perhaps slightly ironically, is we might have to lose some of the verges with the tree planting to the frontage to make it happen. There are issues if we look at the wider scheme of the profiling and the fact that this actually drops down quite a lot down this way. So it's not a case of just pushing everything a bit further along. It would have knock-on effects on the rest of the scheme. So I'd be slightly concerned if, taking the advice of both the Mr. Milligan today and also the ARB officer here at Broadland, when they've said that 1.5 metres is sufficient, that we added more, because then that would have knock-on effects on the scheme.
Okay, thank you. Right. Does anybody else wish to speak?
Sorry, John.
Yes, Councillor Monker, then Councillor Karimi.
If Councillor Beale's proposed that amendment, does he need to get a seconder then, or is that just going to be wiped out?
Well, it's
or
not
is it just
it's not a
practical to do
possible
it?
amendment, is it? It's not a viable amendment. I don't think so. I don't think we can.
I don't know.
we
I'm
can
just
consider-
that was just a question out there before we move on. If it needs to be, Helen, do you?
Through the chair, the officers have advised us we can actually put that a condition on if we so wish. So I am actually seeking a seconder.
All right. Is there a seconder? No, can't see a seconder. Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John. I just wanted to get it cleared out of the way rather than having
Right.
to come back.
Does anybody else wish to speak before we go to the vote? Councillor Karimi Guran-Loon.
Sorry, I forgot to mention this. Under the comments on page 34, the play facility access, they said there should be disabled friendly access to the play area from at least one direction. And currently the footpath access is shown to pass through the flood attenuation lagoon. Can anyone comment on that?
Apologies, I'm just having a quick read of that.
Page 34, Ben.
Yeah, I can see that now.
At the bottom.
So, in terms of the play area, the access would certainly be compliant with all the relevant legislation and restrictions, because it would have to be as a matter of law. In my view, the pedestrian access actually runs adjacent to the lagoon area. It doesn't run through it at the moment, so I don't see that as being an issue.
So you can guarantee there's disabled access to that play area?
the play area will have to be built in accordance with DDA requirements. So yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. It's been proposed by Councillor Moncur, seconded by myself, that we approve this application, subject to the following conditions set out on page 51, which are plans and documents, submission of precise details of external materials, implementation of noise mitigation measures as proposed in the submitted noise assessment, and also that we have that second entrance subject to highways approval. So if I can ask Dawn to do a roll call, please.
Chair, apologies, Chair. Could I just, one very quick question as a result of what you just said.
Right.
Can I just go back to Helen? Did you say earlier on that we are actually approving the application rather than approving delegation to Director of Posts? Was that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Ben updated that earlier on because we had that outstanding issue resolved. We are looking to approve with those conditions, with that additional one that you've also requested about that second access subject to highways.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, if we can proceed with the roll call, please.
Thank you, gentlemen. So if members could indicate if they are for or against the proposed recommendation in front of you. Councillor Adams is not with us. Councillor Beadle.
For.
Councillor Brennan.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Folger.
Against.
Councillor Harrison.
For.
Councillor Creamy Govan-Lou.
Sorry, against.
Councillor Lorne is not with us. Councillor Moncur.
For.
Councillor Prutton.
Against.
And Councillor Ward.
For.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members voting for and 3 against. Chairman, that is carried.
That's carried. Thank you very much. We'll now have a 5-minute comfort break. And if one of the officers could please contact Councillor Lorne in that time. Okay, 5-minute break from now.
If all members could, if they leave their desk, turn off their cameras and mute themselves, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Leah, has Councillor Harrison left the meeting?
Believe, yeah, I think he's just lost connection.
Okay.
I think he's now rejoining, but
Okay. Wonderful, thank you. Is Councillor Adams able to unmute himself and his video? Did we stop him or did he stop himself?
he stopped himself. I have requested he turned it back on. He turned it back
He's
on.
coming. You're here.
Hello again, everyone. Hello.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thank you very much. If I could please ask Officer Matthews to do a roll call just to confirm that we're all back in the room.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Here.
Councillor Beadle.
Present.
Councillor Brennan.
Present.
Councillor Fisher.
Here.
Councillor Folger.
Present.
Councillor Harrison.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Creamy Goodwin-Lou.
Present.
Councillor Lawn.
Present.
Councillor Moncur.
Here.
Councillor Prutton.
Present.
And Councillor Ward.
Present.
All present, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And if I could just confirm before we move on to the second application for Fengate Farm, Fengate Marsham, Councillor Harrison, can I just ask, you said at the beginning that you would be speaking on this application. Can you confirm, please, if you would be speaking as a local member or as a planning committee member?
As a local member, but as part of the committee, if you see what I mean. I'm not going to stand and make a specific
No, I just need to have confirmation that you haven't
speech.
come.
I'm going to deal with it as it goes. Is that all right?
That's fine, but I just need confirmation that you still have an open mind on the application, that you haven't already made a decision.
Well, no. I had an open mind. I've had an open mind on development in that particular area for a long time. So yes, absolutely.
That's lovely. Thank you. So apologies. I just had to confirm that was the situation. Okay.
No, I know the area intimately, so that's it. Yeah.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to our second application, and it's application 2020-1275, Fengate Farm, Fengate Marsham. And we'll ask Officer Rook if you could please do the presentation.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'll just share my screen, so you can just put that on. I'll just get it for you. There it is. So, application Fengate Farm at Fengate Marsham. This is an application for 5 dwellings. As you can see from the description there, this is in lieu of a conversion of agricultural buildings, which has been granted a prior approval under a 2018 application. Just first of all, the application has been reported to committee as the officer recommendation is contrary to the provisions of the development plan. First of all, the application site. So we've got a complex of agricultural buildings. This area here is known as Fengate. It's just to the north of Marsham, which is in this area here on the plan. Moving in to the location plan. So Fengate is the road itself, takes you into an area of Marsham known as Fengate, and the area of application site is outlined in red here. These are the agricultural buildings which are proposed to be demolished to facilitate the development. To the south of the site, we've got residential dwellings, number 51, which is referred to in your report, and comments have been received from that property. Further residential properties from numbers 43 to 49. Opposite the site is another area of agricultural buildings, but not forming part of this application. Then the buildings to the north here are commercial buildings adjoining the site, and a further residential dwelling just further to the north, accessed off a little drive off of Fengate itself. A bit more detail on the existing agricultural buildings. It's a complex of formerly a pig fattening unit, so we've got various buildings associated with that. A grain sort of store in this part of the site here, in a large storage hay and straw building on the frontage of the site, and we've got some photographs of that, so you get a context of that a little bit later through the presentation. Access into the farm unit is in this corner here, and this is the same position of the proposed access for the development itself. you start to see the context of some of the scale of some of these buildings, large agricultural buildings, sort of profile sheeting, the sort of fairly typical form of buildings itself. Moving through, what I wanted to do before I showed you the layout of the current application is show you the layout from the prior approval. So this is the application 2018-1827, was granted for the conversion of some of those buildings, not all of them, but that was set in this position here. So we had a pair of semi-detached properties on plots 1 and 2, another pair at plots 3 and 4. Part of the large sort of grain store was shown to be retained, part demolished to facilitate the access. Then the 5th unit was a small unit in this part of the site here. The current proposal retains that access, removes the large storage building at the front of the site and replaces it with plots 4 and 5. We then have a further pair of properties in the centre of the site at plots 2 and 3, then a detached unit at the end of the site here on plot 1. All the way through here, they are provided with cart shed style garaging. So that's the garaging for units 1 and 2, and the garages for units 3, 4 and 5 in this position here, all served by a roadway, a gravelled roadway into the site. But the extent of the application site is exactly the same as it was granted under the prior approval. The difference is we're now not looking to convert the buildings, we're looking to demolish all the buildings and then put the new dwellings in their place. These are the designs of the dwellings themselves. So plot 1 here, which is the one that sits out on the western boundary of the site, a single story building, 3 bedrooms, provided with combination of a little brick sort of wall at the front of the building, mainly served by boarding, timber boarding to the front and the sides and the rear, and a clay pantile roof. That's unit 1. Units 2 and 3, that's the front elevation. So again, single story, semi-detached properties, picking up on that same form with a low brick wall, timber boarding, pantile roof, picked up on each of the elevations. And the only difference is plots 4 and 5, which is this is the front elevation. So these are provided as 1.5 story properties with the accommodation up in the roof space, but again, brick wall, timber boarding and pantile roof to have that sort of consistent finish across the development. And that's the cart shed style garaging, again, with the timber boarding and the pantile roof. So a fairly consistent sort of palette of external materials. Some photographs from within the site. So these are the existing buildings, which are now shown to be demolished, but you can see the scale of these, some of them probably bigger than the single story that we've got on the current proposal. Views from within the site. So this is that large storage barn on the road frontage and the grain store, which I mentioned earlier. And these are the photographs from within the site. So we're stood roughly at the entrance. This is the vehicular access into the site, just on the right-hand side here. So that's looking back across those properties I mentioned. Numbers sort of 49 to 43 are in this general direction. Then that's the view across the large sort of straw store on the frontage of the site, which is now to be demolished. Previously, part of that was to be retained, and that's coming away, and that'll be the general location for plots 4 and 5. This is also to be removed. That would have been the plot 5 under the prior approval scheme, but that's now to be demolished. And then that's just a view, probably just as we're turning into the commercial entrance, you can see the grain store and the end of that building, which again will all be demolished, and the plots 4 and 5 will be set further back into the site. And then just some general views. That's the access looking up towards the commercial units, and that's the property to the north, which I showed you on the OS plan. Views within the commercial yard, and then views. This is the entrance into the site, and that quite large sort of storage building, which will be removed as part of the development. Existing boundary wall to number 51, just coming into view now. So that's the neighbouring property. Currently, that's got a view across the site and looking into the side of that large building. With that coming away, they're now actually supportive of the proposals, because of the proposals they view would tidy up the site and provide a more in keeping development for them. You can see their outlook is across that part of the site, and therefore this area here, opening that up, is quite advantageous for them. So I'll leave that plan on just while I go through the report. So I've mentioned the application is seeking full permission for the demolition of a group of farm buildings. The site has consent for a Class Q prior approval under the 2018-1827, but that was for a conversion of the farm buildings to 5 dwellings. There is a correction, it is mentioned within the supplementary schedule. Apologies for this, but on page 76 of your agenda, the approval date of the prior approval application was incorrectly stated at paragraph 2.2. The correct approval date of that number of that application is the 22nd of January 2019, meaning that this approval does not expire until the 22nd of January 2022. So it's still got quite a while to run. In terms of consultation representations, these are all as reported. I've got no updates to give on that side of things. And then just a summary of the main issues for consideration. These are the principle of development, the impacts on the character and appearance of the area, neighbour amenity and highway safety. Principle of development, the site is located outside of the settlement limit that has been defined for Marsham, where policy GC2 of the DMDPD seeks to locate new development. It does state that outside of these limits, development which does not result in any significant adverse impact will be permitted where it accords with a specific allocation or policy of the development plan. In this case, the site is not allocated and there is no other policy of the plan which would allow this type of development in this location. However, material to this decision is the extant permission for the conversion of some of the buildings on site to 5 dwellings under the prior approval. And there is a reasonable prospect that this development could be implemented before it expires next year. Taking this into account, it is considered that the principle of constructing 5 dwellings instead of converting some of the agricultural buildings to 5 dwellings is a significant material consideration in favour of these proposals. However, we do need to assess the details of the change, the comparison. Turning to the impact, the proposals on the character and appearance of the area. As you've seen from the photographs, existing buildings are typically large agricultural buildings clad in profile sheeting. The site is currently overgrown and untidy. The removal of these buildings and replacement with buildings of a scale and appearance more sympathetic to the site will open up and enhance the appearance of the site. All buildings except the houses on plots 4 and 5 will be single story, and all buildings will have external materials in keeping with the rural character. The proposals are therefore considered to meet the requirements of Policy 2 of the JCS and Policy GC4 of the DMDPD. The report also sets out the relationship of the proposed development to the neighbour at number 51 Fengate. It is considered the current proposals have an improved arrangement for both future occupiers of the development and the neighbour at number 51 compared to the prior approval scheme for the reasons set out in the report. In terms of highway safety, it's noted the Parish Council has objected for a number of reasons, including the extra traffic that this proposal will generate. The Highway Authority, however, are not objecting, given the previous approval under the prior approval application. It is considered that as the current application is for 5 dwellings, which is the same number as the extant approval, it cannot be argued that this will generate extra traffic, and therefore the proposals are considered to meet the policies TS3 and TS4 of the DMDPD. Should also be noted that the development of 5 dwellings triggers the requirements of policies RL1 and EN3 of the DMDPD to make adequate provision and subsequent management of formal recreation space and the provision of green infrastructure within the district. As the site is not large enough to accommodate these elements on site, a Section 106 agreement is necessary to secure commuted payments for the provision of these facilities off-site. Overall, whilst it is recognised the proposed dwellings are in a location outside of the settlement limit, the extant prior approval for 5 dwellings is a significant material consideration, which weighs in favour of the planning application. The proposals are considered to enhance the character and appearance of the area. They have an improved relationship on the neighbouring property and will not have a significant adverse impact on highway safety. In addition, the proposals also bring about commuted payments for recreational purposes and green infrastructure, which were not required as part of the prior approval consent. In conclusion, the proposals represent an acceptable form of development, and it is recommended to delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Planning to grant approval subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure off-site contributions for formal recreation and green infrastructure, and subject to the conditions as listed on page 65 of your agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. And members, do you have any questions for the officer in relation to the presentation, please? Councillor Karimi Guvenlu.
Hi Matthew, just one question. Those cart sheds, are they big enough for one car or two cars, please?
They are big enough for two cars. So each plot has a sort of double cart shed.
Okay, thank you. That's all I want to know. Thanks.
Councillor Beadle.
Thank you, Chair. If we approve this, presumably it's because it's had prior approval for the existing buildings, and part of the rationale for that, presumably, is in the legislation that this will maintain the historic integrity of the buildings in this environment. With this development, then that will be lost, although there is a, shall we say, a passing hand to rural design. Is that correct? Could I ask the officer that?
Yeah, I think it's partly as far as the reason for the prior approval procedure is to try and get sustainable development in the countryside. We consider that obviously reuse of the buildings and the location of structures in that location would be that sustainable reuse. What we have to take regard of, though, is this fallback position that they could build those 5 conversions. Probably in the buildings would be slightly larger than what we've got on the table now. And we wouldn't have the commuted sums that are on offer as part of the 5 houses. So there's a bit of a balance there, but officers consider that given the scale of the development, the single story nature of plots 1, 2 and 3, and the cottage style of plots 4 and 5, that we are still retaining that rural characteristic given the materials that have been proposed.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Apologies, I should have advised you that we don't have any public speakers for this this application this morning, so we will go into open discussion, and then we will come to the conclusion with the proposer and a seconder. Councillor Harrison.
Yes, I mean, I think when you asked me, could I keep an open mind, and I've tried to keep an open mind of this problem with Fengate. For the last 15 or 20 years, I mean, that's long enough, and so certainly, sorry, and certainly something needs to be done about them. What? Sorry, I think. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you go ahead. I think there's a bit of a delay, but you carry on. Sorry.
I'll take it slowly then. Are we still? Basically, what bothers me is, the representative Fengate has 20 houses on it. It's a very small, narrow lane running up from the main road, the A140. And this addition of 5 would increase the traffic out of the road quite considerably. Now, it is actually directly onto the A140. And as most of you know, that particular section is 50 miles an hour and very fast. And there have been accidents there. And I'm slightly surprised because when we mentioned they've been eyeing up this development for years, and all the time the parish council put forward ideas, and I talked to the highway engineer, oh, no chance of that, no chance of that, because of danger. Then suddenly now we have the highways suddenly reversing around and saying they see no problem. And the parish council is right. In previous representations, it was turned down flat on the grounds of safety on the road. And so I am torn between what I think would be a good developer and the inadequacy, I suppose, of the performance of the highways in changing their mind. Why they should have changed their mind over the last 20 years when the traffic intensity has increased, I cannot imagine. So I wonder if Matthew could answer some of that perambulations.
I'll try. I'm not aware of the obviously all the historic issues with it. All I can advise members is that they they've took a view in relation to the prior approval application. I think on the basis that the site could generate as a pig fattening unit, it could generate an amount of traffic associated with that. And as they normally do, they do a comparison of traffic movements that could exist from a existing use and look to see how that relates and compares to a proposed use. And the view was that there was a comparison between the two that they were able to accept under the prior approval. Their current comments obviously relate to that and state, given the previous permissions on this site for residential conversion under the prior approval, they feel it very difficult to pass adverse highway safety comments on this proposal. So I think it's the scale of development. I'm not sure what scale they were talking about in their previous conversations with you, Councillor, but the scale of 5 dwellings is a scale that they feel is comparative to the traffic movements that could be generated through the agricultural use, and they've used that in their assessment.
Okay.
I think
Jim.
if I can just add, that's the clear distinction. It's because there is already permission for 5 dwellings through the prior approval that this is no different to the additional traffic being generated. Had it been a completely new use, new build, without that permitted allowance to already have that activity from that site, I'm sure they would come up with a different view. It's the fact that you have a unit with 5, you have a site with 5 dwellings already through the prior approval. This isn't adding to additional traffic manoeuvres that's already could be implemented. If it was a greenfield site with a new use, then that would be a different consideration the Highway Authority would have to take into account.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Prutton, sorry, Councillor Harrison, did you want to, have you anything else?
No, it's really my concerns I tend to, over the safety really, and I just cannot agree with the highways assessment on a personal or any other basis. That's all. I'll be quiet now.
Join the club, David.
No, you can say whatever however much you want to. Councillor Prutton.
Yes, paragraph 511, the impact on residential amenity. Reference is made to a 6-foot high brick or 2 metre high brick wall on the northern boundary and some trees. Matthew, could you kindly just sort of indicate where on your map that is? The writing is so small on the photocopy here. And B, what's the other side of this 6-foot high brick wall?
Okay, I'll try and share my screen once more. Let me get it in front of me.
If you don't mind, please. There's something.
Yes, it is quite. I had to look back on the main screen, I must admit, to see how that's annotated. Let me have a quick look. So if we're talking about the northern boundary, it's this boundary here.
Oh, there. See, north is north. That's almost east.
Well,
Carry on.
The annotation here. So yeah, we're working on the basis that this is the northern boundary, and this annotation here, which even if I zoom in, you probably still can't read, although it does exist in 2 metre high block wall to be rendered and painted, it says, and that's that section through there, and that's immediately next to the industrial unit. And then there's another 1 metre high wall along here, which is also to be retained, but a 1 metre high fence is to then be constructed on top of that, to provide a 2 metre in total boundary to these gardens for plots 2 and 3. Yeah. And then there are trees in that area there. So that's the area we're talking about, but it's to that industrial unit.
Okay, then thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fulcher, I have got you on my list, but I just need to go to Councillor Karimi Guvenlu first. Thank you.
Right. No, I didn't.
Oh, sorry, I've got you down on my list. Apologies. Okay, Councillor Fulcher.
Thank you, Chairman. Given the extant permission which at the moment, I consider that this application is an improvement on that, as clearly it tidies up the site very much, in that the current buildings will be demolished and replaced by an entirely new development of the same size and with 5 dwellings. And clearly I would like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation. I think it's a distinct improvement on the current situation.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And I haven't got any others who I've got to, oh, sorry, Councillor Brennan.
And we've got Councillor Fisher. Sorry, Chairman.
Okay, apologies. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Matthew, could you just possibly bring up your slide 26 again, just for a bit of clarity and to help others perhaps as well? Thank you.
This one.
Plots 4 and 5. On the eastern edge of those two properties, there are two small white bars. Do I take it that that is access onto the highway?
Yes, that's the front elevation. So that lines up with the front doors of those properties. So that would be the access out, pedestrian access. Obviously, they've got vehicular access. And I think I saw on one of the elevations that plot 5 has got a rear door into the garage here, so they can get into the door from that direction. But yeah, that would be the pedestrian access from the front of the properties.
I think you're probably thinking where I'm going with this. Councillor Harrison, I'm not familiar with that actual piece of road itself. Councillor Harrison has already commented on the fact that it's quite narrow. My reservation is, as soon as you put pedestrian access onto that road, the residents are going to park there, visitors are going to park there. Is there any way that we can not have that access and they have to access it from the site entrance?
I'm just putting a slide up. This is that area here. Let me just get a photograph of it. That's that part there. So it's not a well-used piece of road, given that it's only serving the commercial unit and that further dwelling.
But is it a through route though, presumably?
It's a through route to those uses. It doesn't go out beyond those.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm just trying to get the discussion.
No, but on that basis,
So
on that basis,
if you look at that as you have that now, if that's where the pedestrian access is going to be, and you know as well as I do that people will park on that road rather than go all the way around into the site.
That's true.
And we've got a bend to the left, so they're going to park outside that pedestrian access point. Anybody coming along the road has got to go onto the offside with a left-hand bend.
They have. Well, I can say to that. Well, there's the potential, but all I can say to that is the Highway Authority have considered that and are content with that arrangement. They haven't asked for any kind of obstructions or bollards or anything like that on that part of the site to prevent that use. You can see the person who took the photograph has parked their car on this side here. I'd say that there's still space for vehicles to get past, even if there's a car parked on that side there. It wouldn't be blocking the highway. It's not something I'd anticipate as being a problem to be negotiated away. The Highway Authority haven't raised it.
Yeah, and then I'll just go a little bit further with that, please. The bit of greenery we see on the left up against the side of this building. Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. Looking at the photocopy you sent us, it appears that is being retained.
There is a green area. Yes, there is a green area on the plan, which is just shown. Let me find it. Sorry. That one. Yeah. So that is an area there.
So that has to be retained. Or I'll be likely to see that suddenly disappear and, oh dear, that came down accidentally.
Okay. Yeah, I take your point. Yeah, an area at the front that's not forming part of the roadway or parking areas or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew.
Okay.
Matthew, just while you've got those photos up, sorry, I was assuming that green section was going to be replanted. I was looking at the photograph, and I think that's just like well, I was just assuming it was just a weed as such that had grown up.
Doesn't look very wide, does it? Doesn't look very wide, but I think what it is mainly that building is obviously coming back when we're demolishing that building, so it may be opening out a little bit of space there. But
I was assuming that was landscaping, so maybe that would be something that we would need to consider. And the other, and in relation to go back to the photograph with the car, I'm assuming that where that car is parked it's also where the turning would be, like a passing lay-by, if that makes sense.
I think it's in front of the agricultural buildings on the other side of the road. So it's probably a little access into that, which they're not being used at the moment.
Yeah,
so it's probably this area here where
Yeah.
this is not in use. I imagine I'm estimating the cars parked in that position there.
Yeah, so I suppose I just need a confirmation that there won't be any through traffic going, and other than just literally down to the two buildings that you say that are at the end of that road. There won't be any any traffic coming from further afield coming up that way. It will literally just be the buildings at the bottom of the road.
That's correct.
At the end of the road.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's fine, thank you. Have I missed anyone else? Anyone else have anything that they want to?
Councillor Fisher.
Sorry, Councillor Fisher, apologies.
Okay, as okay, everything has in fact been debated. I'm happy to second the proposal from Councillor Folger. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Karimi Guvenlu has already seconded it. Okay, is there any further discussion? If nobody's got anything else they've got to say, then we can go to Councillor Brennan. Apologies.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry. Yeah, I'm still a little bit worried about the point I made earlier. Looking at the overall map showing the red area as the development site. As far as I read this, again, I've never travelled on that piece of road, but to me, that roadway continues off the map. It must be a through route to somewhere. Perhaps Councillor Harrison might be able to guide us on that as his local knowledge.
Well, going up past the new development, it just goes to the end house, it stops, and then up from there, there's the fields swing up from Marsham up to Aylsham. That's the sort of area where beautiful, beautiful natural.
Sorry, David. So that is a no through road in other words.
In effect, yeah.
Okay.
It's a dead end.
Yeah. Thanks.
Nobody goes down there except the owners, I assure you.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we can move to the vote, and if I can just advise members, it's been proposed by Councillor Fulcher, seconded by Councillor Karimi Guvenlu, that we should as a committee agree to delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Planning to approve this application, subject to completion of Section 106 agreement with heads of terms set out on page 65, and subject to conditions also stated on page 65 of your papers. Okay, if Officer Matthews, if we could please go to the vote.
Thank you, Chairman. If members could indicate if they are for or against the proposal. So Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Beadle.
For.
Councillor Brennan.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Folger.
For.
Councillor Harrison.
Against.
Councillor Karimi Guvenlu.
For.
Councillor Lawn.
For.
Councillor Moncur.
For.
Councillor Prutton.
For.
And Councillor Ward.
For.
So that's 10 members voting for and 1 against, Chairman. So that's carried.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, and we will now move on to application number 3, and it's application number 2020-0135, 12 Grange Close, Old Catton. And if members, if I can just advise you, after this presentation, we don't have any public speakers for this application either. So we will go straight into discussion with the proposer and seconder at the end of the discussion. And Officer Rook, if you could please go ahead with the presentation.
Of course, let me get it in front of me. Yep, so 12 Grange Close, Old Catton. This is a rear extension. It's classed or described as a rear orangery or garden room with associated internal alterations. This application is being reported to committee as the applicant is an employee of the council and is also a close relative of a member of the district council, and an objection to the application has been received, which is why it's necessary to report it to members today. So this is number 12, outlined in red here. Grange Close is a cul-de-sac of 6 pairs of semi-detached houses, access off George Hill between the Spixworth Road and North Walsham Road. You can see from here that the application property is located to the north of the adjoining property, number 11. So if I just go through the photographs, you just see that. Perhaps move that in a little bit closer. You can see the arrangement. So this is obviously in the built-up area of Old Catton itself. That's the arrangements for numbers 12 and 11. Once again, I'll just zoom in so you can just see that a little bit more clearly. So number 12 is here. It's already had some previous extensions, a sort of a wraparound side and rear extension, and then a smaller lean-to extension adjacent to the boundary with number 11. Number 11 also has got a sort of wraparound extension, but it's got a conservatory in this position here in proximity to the boundary. You can see the general arrangement of the property's rear extension, so it's not an uncommon form of development on these properties, but obviously in this case it's the arrangement of the proposals of this specific proposal that being asked to consider. Let me just move that out a little bit. So we're in the conservation area of Old Catton, outlined in red here. So the report refers to the requirements under the Planning Listed Buildings Conservation Areas Act, section 72 of that. There's a further consideration in our decision making that's identified within your report, whereby members have to have regard to the special attention shall be paid to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character and appearance of the area. And that will be referred to when I get to the appraisal section. This identifies the position of the proposed rear extension. Need to just identify the orientation on this plan so that the north is the top of this side here. So we're actually identifying the boundary of the properties between 11 and 12. And that once again, that this is to the north of that boundary with number 11. Then the existing plans. So I showed you on the aerial photograph that sort of wraparound single story extension, which is this here, which serves as sort of a kitchen and a dining room. And then there's an element here to an extension of the living room, which isn't quite as deep, but that's in that position relative to the boundary. So the boundary continues off of that living room extension there. And then that's the neighbour's conservatory in that position. Neighbour's got a couple of trees, one of which is an apple tree in that position there. And if we go to the proposals, you can see that it's proposed to build this is the garden room, primarily a flat roof extension, which is coming off of the living room extension, coming off the dining room extension. And that's the elevation along the boundary to number 11, a blank wall, 2.93 meters high, 4.65 meters in length, and then 7.65 meters across the width of it. Given that there's already this element here, I think we've quoted in the report, there's a total projection off of that original rear wall in combination with the existing living room extension and the proposed garden room extension of 6.67 meters. So that gives you that continuous built form along that boundary at 6.67 meters. But that's the form, as I said, flat roof, brick wall. There was a roof lantern in the center, but that'll be set behind or set into the roof. So you may just see the very top of that. You wouldn't see all of that lantern if you're down at ground level. Photographs of the site. So this is the front of number 12. Quite interesting properties with this sort of the stone detailing. All the properties on Grange Close are built in this form. This is the rear elevation. So once again, you can see the wraparound with this sort of lean-to form and the living room extension, which is this area here. Obviously the boundary and number 11 in that position. Then move around and you can start to see the relationship between the existing living room extension and the conservatory of number 11. Estimating that the proposal, I'll just move that a little bit, that the extent of the conservatory would be about in this position here, taking in the total 4.64 meters length off of the existing living room. We're estimating it being in this position here, certainly beyond the rear of the existing conservatory of the neighbour. And there's just a closer viewing of that. And then this is a photograph from within the neighbour's conservatory at number 11. So you can see currently the fence is in this position here. That flank wall would continue along the length of that conservatory view there. up to the height of probably about the height of where this is here, running that through, maybe just slightly above this roof detailing on the conservatory, but it would be filling that area in there with brickwork. And then that's just the final elevation plan. So back to the report. As I've said, the extension is located to the north of the adjoining neighbour. The site's located in the Old Catton Conservation Area. Consultation representations, these are all as reported. There's no updates to give members in that regard. Issues for consideration are the impacts on neighbour amenity and the character and appearance of the area, including the conservation area considerations that I've mentioned. The report sets out the relationship of the proposed extension and the neighbour at number 11, given its conservatory and glazing towards the boundary. It's noted that the brick wall of the proposed extension will be clearly visible above the boundary fence from within the neighbour's conservatory. It's noted the proposed extension will project beyond the length of the neighbour's conservatory in close proximity to the boundary fence, so that number 11 will lose some daylight. However, the orientation of the property is such that the neighbour at number 11 is located to the south of the application property and the proposed extension, so that no direct sunlight will be lost. Overall, whilst it's accepted that the proposed extension will cause some lack of daylight to the neighbour's conservatory, the orientation of the properties and the design and form of the proposed extension officers consider means it will have an acceptable impact on neighbour amenity in accordance with policy GC4 of the DMDPD. Turning to the impact of the proposal on the character and appearance of the area and the conservation area considerations, the extension is to the rear of the house and therefore not visible from the wider area or the Old Catton Conservation Area. Therefore, the extension will have a neutral impact on the surrounding area and meets the requirements of Section 72 of the Planning Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990. Accordingly, the proposals represent an acceptable form of development which accord with the development plan policies, and approval is recommended subject to the conditions as listed on page 71 of your agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And as I said earlier, members, we don't have any public speaking for this application. So do we have anybody who wishes to ask any questions? And we've got Councillor Brennan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Matthew, just going back to 5.5, the mention of the fence, the possibility of maintenance issues. Are we able to know whether that fence belongs to the applicant's property or to the neighbour?
I don't have that information. I'm sorry, Councillor Brennan.
Okay. I think that might be important. If it belongs to the neighbour, that particular fence, then the problem is theirs if they can't maintain it. If it belongs to the applicant, then obviously, from what this says in here, the only way they could possibly get access to maintain it is to get onto the neighbour's land. Whether they're that friendly or not, I don't know. But it does worry me a little bit when you see that this comes up.
Okay, thank you. And
does it not mean that looking at the picture over this locked barbecue or whatever it is, with the posts this side, number 12 side of the fence, doesn't that mean therefore that the owners of the fence are actually number 11?
It doesn't always work that way.
I was going to say that's an assumption. It's probably an assumption.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're concrete posts, so they just the panels just drop in. They're the same amount of concrete either side, aren't they?
It would normally be that way, but
methinks I assume too much.
Okay, Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm happy to propose that the application is agreed. The important fact, I think, is the fact that it is to the north of the neighbour, and hence, I think, as the officer pointed out, that there will be no impact on light or sun or anything. It's about a 14-foot extension. I know it looks sort of a bit of a blank wall, but it's single story. I really see no objection or no reason to object, and hence I'm happy to propose the recommendation on page 71. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm happy to. Sorry, Councillor Adams?
Yeah, okay. I'll second it, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? No. Okay, thank you very much. Members, it has been proposed by Councillor Fisher, seconded by Councillor Adams, that we should as a committee agree to approve this application subject to conditions on page 71 of your papers. And Officer Matthews, if I could ask you to do the roll call, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members could indicate if they are for or against the proposal. Councillor Adams?
For.
Councillor Beadle?
For.
Councillor Brennan? Councillor Fisher?
For.
Councillor Folger?
For.
Councillor Harrison?
For.
Councillor Karimi Guvenlu?
For.
Councillor Lawn?
For.
Councillor Moncur?
For.
Councillor Prutton?
For.
Councillor Ward?
For.
Chairman, that's unanimous. That's carried.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, members, that brings us to the end of our applications, and we will now move on to agenda item number 6, appeals. And Helen, would you like to briefly go through this with us?
I can do it if you like.
Oh, yes. Oh, sorry, Matthew,
Yep.
of course.
Yeah. So yeah, on the page 72 of your agenda, we can see we haven't had any appeal decisions. We did have 6 last month, so none this month, but we do have a new appeal that's been lodged. This was a full application for 6 bungalows on Green Lane in Horsford, land east of Oak Dean. It was a delegated refusal on grounds that it's outside the settlement limit, classed to be unsustainable, having an adverse impact on the rural character of the area. So that's the summary for the appeal that's been lodged.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Nope. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you.